Hi there and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Meryl Johnston. The Lifestyle Accountant Show exists to help today's accounting firm owners build successful firms while also living a healthy, happy life without sacrificing sleep, your weekends, or time with loved ones. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Parkinson, the owner of Diverse Business Consultants, a remote 25-person bookkeeping firm based in Australia. Sarah lives on a farm with her husband and 3 children, and their closest town has a population of 100 people. She's owned and operated businesses for the last 20 years, and today we're talking with her about her experience in making 3 different acquisitions at Diverse, and one of them was acquiring a portfolio of fees from me at Beanages.
I think it was pretty apparent to me early on that it was a good match. And of the 3 acquisitions that I have been through now, it's still probably the smoothest because we were the closest aligned in that all of your clients were on fixed fees. That was easy. We could move them onto our ignition proposals. They were on the same billing cycle.
Today, we're covering acquisitions in the bookkeeping firm space. We start by talking about Sarah's backstory of buying into a bookkeeping firm as an experienced small business owner, but she wasn't a bookkeeper at that point. Sarah shares why she became interested in acquisitions, and then we do a breakdown of the 3 different acquisitions. The first, buying a book of fees from Beanages. The second, which was through a broker, and so we discussed the pros and cons of that. And then the third, which was different again, and so Sarah compares and contrasts those 3 different acquisitions. She also shares some lessons like why a retention clause is critical and how to negotiate that with a seller. And when transitioning clients, something that came up for her, an unexpected factor that can make the transition quite difficult and how to avoid that. All that and more coming right up on the Lifestyle Accountant Show. Are you worn out by the complexities of sales tax? Or maybe just tired of constantly picking up the pieces when software messes up? It's time to embrace a better way with Tax Valet. Tax Valet's sales tax compliance suite handles everything for you, from data prep and filings to managing audits, all for one simple, easy to understand monthly fee. Tax Valet is looking to form meaningful relationships with accountants who truly care about their clients' experience and want to partner for the long haul. We've been recommending our Beanages clients chat to Tax Valet about their sales tax requirements for years. If you're interested, check out taxvalet.com, that's taxvalet.com, and check out their partner program. Remember, with Tax Valet, it's not just about making sales tax easier, it's about making your life easier. Hey Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And can you tell the listeners, where are you at the moment?
I am currently at our farm in Dallacca, which is about 5 hours west of Brisbane.
I think that's such an incredible story that you can run a large bookkeeping business from the country, 5 hours from the nearest major city. When did you move there?
I moved here when I got married, so that was in about 2011. And it's been fantastic, but COVID really made it far more socially acceptable to work remotely, because before that I was scurrying back to Brisbane frequently, and we did have a traditional office in Brisbane. So it's just so fantastic now that I can be so open and honest about where I work from, and to be a country wife with a kick-ass awesome career is, so fantastic.
Is there some pressure on you from the other women in your area that you should be, I don't know, baking scones or entertaining, I don't even know the terminology, the shearers? It's a bit unusual what I do from out here, and I still try and contribute as much as I can to the community, and I'm on the local committees, but my friendship group out here is so diverse. So there's some women who don't work at all and are really, supporting their families on the farm, and then others that do other interesting things like interior design or whatever it might be. So it's
a real mix. But I mean, not a lot of people, even in my local community, would really know or understand what I actually do. And that's kind of wonderful. And also sometimes you're a bit like, hey, I actually did this really cool thing and I'm working on this at the moment. So it's really interesting and non-traditional.
How many people are in your local community? What's the local town size?
Well, Dalaka is tiny. Like there's one hot pink pub if anybody's looking for a road trip. And I think the population of Dalaka is, say, 100 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
There's a service station, a pub, and a few houses and not much else. So it's very, very small. But this is not really like, your remote outback. Like you'd consider this quite metropolitan to only be 5 hours from Brisbane.
Wow. I'm so curious about all of this. It's not like you can just pop down to get Thai takeaway if you don't feel like cooking, or you can just you forgot the milk and you can just pop down to the local supermarket.
No way. And that is the hardest thing, that, just being completely honest, that I've really struggled with in having a career and running the business and through such a high growth phase is if I was in the city, it's like, okay, I'm going to get somebody to help me with cleaning the house. I'm going to get a gardener. I could get a nanny to help me, or the kids could go to after school care, or I could get takeaway, or what's the meal thing, HelloFresh or something like that to help us out. Whereas out here, you do not have that. The best thing that I've worked out is with the local supermarket, I can email in my orders and they will pack it up. So I can just pick it up instead of doing my groceries. But yes, it is a totally different world, and you've got to be super organized with all those things.
So let's get into a little more about your business. Can you talk about what Diverse looks like now, and then a bit of the backstory of how you got into bookkeeping?
I would love to. So Diverse today is a team of 25 Australian remote bookkeepers, and we specialise in looking after service-based businesses where almost 100% zeros. So, we're all about systemising and automating your bookkeeping processes. So that's what it looks like today. We've got people across South Australia, Victoria, Queensland and New South Wales. It's ended up being an all-female team, we've had a few men, but they've kind of come and gone. And so I've really had to build a business that works for me. So yes, it's obviously ultimately about the clients, but I've also made decisions along the way to create a company that works for me, my family and my lifestyle. As far as how I got into bookkeeping, that is a bit of a random story. So when I left school, I obtained a marketing degree and I worked in marketing and PR for some time. And then I've always been quite entrepreneurial, which sounds a bit crazy, but I worked in a marketing business that I created for a couple of years, and then I created a food business, which was like a gourmet deli style business before Coles Online and Woolworths Online, and we did home delivered fresh food in Brisbane and the surrounds. And I grew that company, and I ended up having a bookkeeper who worked with me for 7 years. And I was so lucky because she was fantastic, a known industry figure, and she also worked for Xero. So I started to work with and learn from her. And then when I got married and was moving to Dalaka and I sold my company in Brisbane, I was thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I can't go from being this busy to making scones. So I said to Colleen, you have trouble finding great bookkeepers and people to work with you. So I started working with Colleen, and then we went into business together. And then over time, I ended up the business from her, and we went our separate ways after a couple of years. And then it's kind of grown and evolved from there. So I think that was about, I started with Diverse in 2015, and it's probably been 4 years completely on my own.
That's so interesting. So don't come from an accounting or bookkeeping background and are running this big successful firm. I have to ask some questions about that transition. So, because it's a really interesting story. I've never heard of this particular scenario before where the non-accountant or bookkeeper joins forces with their accountant or bookkeeper and then ultimately ends up taking over the business. So was that your plan when you and Colleen started working together and you joined the business, or how did that play out?
Absolutely not. So the plan was that I was going to utilize my marketing and PR skills, and because I had that knowledge from being a business owner and being a client of a small bookkeeping firm. I was meant to be focused on the business development and providing some support from a bookkeeping sense, because I had picked up one of those really annoying clients that's like, I can do this myself. So I had picked up some skills along the way. And as I had a business degree, I did have some key fundamentals there. And then over time, as the business started to grow, I think Colleen realised that she enjoyed more, being a solopreneur or whatever you say, or a digital nomad. So she loved working by herself and was less keen on the people side of things as the business kind of grew. So it just became, I wanted to grow and see what we could achieve, and that wasn't her jam. So we went our separate ways, but it wasn't the intention from the beginning.
And so what was that negotiation like of the two of you deciding what to do with the business and how to transition it across to you and for her to move on? Were they tricky conversations? How long did it take you?
Yes, deeply, deeply tricky, because I think we both liked each other and we enjoyed working together, but then there were just components that weren't working, and our aspirations were just so different. So it was really tricky, because you're trying to maintain the relationship and do the right thing by them and vice versa, but then you're trying to go after, what you'd also want and get the best result. So I think we ended up, I can't quite think what the split was, but I might have retained 70% and Colleen took 30%, so that she still had, an income and a business for herself afterwards. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's no way beating around the bush. It's a very anxiety-inducing time when you're trying to work out. You can't see into the future and you don't know. And even when you're splitting, because it had started as Colleen's business, I was very nervous that people wouldn't stay with me. So I retained the Diverse name because I felt that was very important. So the clients that stayed with me had the seamless branding and stayed with the Diverse brand, whereas the people that went with Colleen had known and worked with her for a long time.
I think that was a smart move. It sounds like the ones that moved to Colleen, it was about her, not so much the brand anyway. I can see how that would have helped with that transition.
Yeah. So I had to get my BAS agent license quick smart, and luckily I'd already done my Cert 4. When I moved to DeLacca, I just thought, I'd better actually get certified. So luckily that was all in place, and but I had to do the BAS agent process.
This podcast is brought to you by Electrify. Are you an accountant grappling with the complexities of crypto? Are your business-savvy crypto clients hard to keep up with? Do you find the intricacies of blockchain technology overwhelming? Don't worry, Electrify is here to help. With their roots in Bitcoin accounting since 2014, they specialize in crafting strategies for SME accountants that not only attract the right clients, but also turn them into profitable partnerships. They'll help you to update your service models and pricing and provide you with relevant training, tooling, and workflows. Work with the team at Electrify to build the foundation to confidently support your clients' crypto transactions and businesses. Check out electrify.finance to find out more. That's electrify.finance. Well, let's transition the conversation now, and we're going to talk about acquisitions. And you're starting to become quite experienced at acquisitions. You've made a few, and I know firsthand because we actually sold a parcel of Bean Ninjas fees to you a number of years ago now. And I think there's some interesting lessons there, and then we'll talk about some of your other acquisitions too. But why don't we start with the Bean Ninjas acquisition, and what's your recollection of how that started and why you were even considering acquisitions at that point?
Yes. Well, I had built Diverse and the systems to be quite robust, and I was really confident in, or as confident as you can be, in how things were working, and I wanted to challenge that and to grow further. So the actual backstory is that I had run into on holidays a couple and a guy that I had known years and years ago that had become really successful, and I started asking him some questions around how he had done that and what he had done. And he explained to me, he was in financial planning, and that they'd made a range of acquisitions, and he explained what their strategy was and how they'd built this large company, which is all up the East Coast and enormous. So I started thinking, just challenging my thinking, well, why couldn't I do the same thing or a similar thing with bookkeeping? So that was where the concept came from. And then I think I had explored a few opportunities before we started talking that it hadn't executed until the Bean Ninjas opportunity. So it was really about looking for ways to grow the company further. I felt that we were underutilizing this structure that we had built.
And so I'll give a little bit of context from the Bean Ninjas side. So this was around the time when Bean Ninjas had decided to go all in on e-commerce. So we were ripping the Band-Aid off. We were changing the headline on our website to say e-commerce growth accountants. And we'd realized, well, actually, yes, we do have a big portfolio of e-commerce clients, but we have all of these other great clients in other industries, and we need to find a new home for them so that we can focus our team's efforts on being great at e-commerce. I had reached out to some people, and I put a post in a Facebook group for accountants and bookkeepers saying, hey, we've got this portfolio of great clients. They're on monthly retainers, they're on Xero, they're well trained to do cloud accounting, and then had shared some more information about that and asked for people to get in contact as to who might be interested in buying this parcel of fees. And I can't remember if you came across the Facebook post or if it was through some other means.
No, it was the Facebook post. I saw it and I pounced. I connected with you. We'd already met, but yes, it was from the Facebook post.
And so I remember that phase. So I created a form as part of that post for people to express their interest and to say, well, what kind of valuation would they give? How would they structure the payments, and also background about their firm, because I try to find someone who operated a business in a similar way to Bean Ninjas where there would be a nice smooth transition for the clients and it would feel like a similar experience. So I think I did something like 15 vetting calls with different firm owners, and most of them I didn't know, but we'd met in person, we'd stayed in touch after XeroCon many, many years ago.
Yes.
And so I think that was a big factor for me in actually that we knew each other, and I felt confident that the clients would get a good experience and that Diverse operated in a similar way to how we operated.
Yes.
What was it like for you when you were starting to think through, well, is this the right deal?
I think it was pretty apparent to me early on that it was a good match. And of the 3 acquisitions that I have been through now, it's still probably the smoothest because we were the closest aligned in that all of your clients were on fixed fees. That was easy. We could move them onto our ignition proposals. They were on the same billing cycle. The other important part was the service factor. So I would say that because we offer phone support and all of those things. It was like actually the clients were hopefully getting a slightly even enhanced experience. So that was a good thing, because when you're going the other way,
Yes.
that's very, very difficult. So it was very smooth in that we were able to negotiate that quite efficiently and quickly, and very clear cut because of the way that you had structured Being Ninjas. It was very much like, okay, well, here's a spreadsheet of, obviously you don't disclose initially who clients are, etc., but like this is client A, B, C, D, their monthly fee, maybe their industry, what their services are. Whereas once you go on and do other deals, you realize it's actually very difficult to get it articulated so clearly.
Yeah, it was interesting. Before we started recording today, I was looking back over some of our emails where we were negotiating the contract and also working on the transition. And for me, something that stood out, I think because we knew each other, we already had that level of trust. I remember one of my emails saying, oh, look, I'm not going to bother with checking with the lawyer about this clause. Let's just move on and get this deal signed. And I think that both you and I had that attitude that we negotiated all of the key terms ourselves. Yes, we both had lawyers representing us to make sure we didn't have anything stupid in the contract or do anything too drastic, but we were able to negotiate most of it ourselves. And I think it was within a couple of weeks that we were able to finalize deal terms, which I think is pretty fast. I've also been involved in other transactions, and that was definitely the fastest that I've had because we were able to negotiate it ourselves mostly.
Absolutely. If it makes, just reach commercial agreement as quickly as you can without compromising, but it's got to be win-win for both, because that saves you a lot in that legal process.
Yes, both in legal fees and also just in time to get the deal done. I've been working on a different type of agreement just recently, and we made the mistake of introducing lawyers too early. So I think what we should have done is agreed all of the terms first and then drafted it with the help of lawyers. So just drafted in simple terms. But instead, the lawyers got involved right at the beginning with all the long, lengthy clauses. And so we had to keep redrafting it every time we were still negotiating the terms. And so that would be a lesson from my perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
So once we negotiated the deal terms, then we started to, well, actually, I'd get your perspective. What were some of the key things you were looking for in the contract when you're from the acquirer side?
Yes. So I think retention is really critical. So having a retention clause is imperative. My thoughts would be not to do a deal without one, no matter how great you think it is, to always negotiate that. So that was important to me, and I was funding it out of that particular deal out of cash flow. So to have the staggered payments was good, and I was really looking to ensure that we were receiving comprehensive information about the clients and the service, the services that they need to be provided, how they'd been serviced, what the procedures were. That was really important to me. So they were probably the two things. And obviously you're wanting to ensure that you're getting quality clients. And I now have a list for any acquisition that I'm looking at of specific things that I ask. I've become very systemized about it nowadays. But those were some of the fundamentals for me at that time. And I don't think maybe being the first one, maybe I would have pushed too hard and gone without a retention. But now in hindsight, I think that's really important.
And from my perspective as the seller, I understand why an acquirer wants a retention clause. And so I've done this quite a few times now, and I've always agreed to that. But I've also negotiated on the timeline of that, because I felt like at some point the responsibility for retaining the client hands over to the acquirer. And so I think we were both pretty reasonable about that. I've had some people want to negotiate retention clauses where the client needs to stay for more than 12 months. Whereas my view is that the transition probably takes about 3 months, and then you need maybe a little bit of extra time after that just to bed them down. But then at a certain point, there's nothing more that I can do from my side to make sure that client stays. And so that's something to think about as either the acquirer or the seller as to, well, what's a reasonable time period for that retention clause or that clawback.
Yeah. Was ours 6 months in the end?
I can't actually remember.
Yeah.
I think it was something like that. I felt like it was reasonable, but I can't actually remember exactly what it was.
Yeah. I think maybe all the 3 deals have all been 6-month retention. So I think if the person's not willing to offer some form of retention, you'd be wondering why. Do they know that there's a client that's, building an in-house finance department or, something on the radar that they're not going to be staying with you or whatever it is.
And I think it actually creates an incentive to have a smooth transition. And I know that's something that you and I collaborated on with the transition. I was looking back at my old emails and I can see that I drafted something to send to our clients, but I was getting your input about, am I positioning diverse the right way? Am I introducing the right people? You did a Loom video to introduce diverse that I could include when I was explaining how it all worked. And we were very clear about, okay, this is the timeline. This is the impact to you. There's no fee increase. We're sharing all of our files and we'll have a Slack channel. So Beanage is going to communicate directly with the diverse team. There's not going to be extra questions. We're kind of trying to preempt all of the questions that the clients might have and communicate that and show you and your team in the best light.
Yes. Well, I learned a lot from you during that process as far as the depth that you went to work through just the construction of the email that to let them know what was happening. Like I think you even recorded individual Loom videos for the clients and then introducing me in a Loom video. That was great. And I've actually now adapted that concept. Like when I let someone know about a price rise, it's like, we'll record them in individual Loom and thinking about, I think one of the questions right at the end was like, how does this impact you? Or what do you need to do next? Like it was very clear and comprehensive. So that was great. But I think still it took, because we didn't obviously retain the Bean Ninjas branding. So, and this is what makes it different to other deals. So we actually had to get the clients to transition to diverse and to sign the paperwork. So, and I think most did, but then there were a few stragglers that we had to be followed up a little bit to make the move. And there were a couple lost in the process, I think, wasn't there?
There were. So we had a few clients on there that weren't very responsive generally, and so they weren't replying to us about sending information to complete their BAS or the reports, but they also weren't replying about the proposals. And so I think we had to count a few marked as lost because they didn't sign with you within the time frame that we were expecting. And then that's one of the downsides when they have to take an action to move over. It's different when you acquire the whole business or it's under the same branding.
Yeah, it's risky. As in, I think also somebody, they ended up moving their bookkeeping to their accountant or whatever it may be. Like you're just causing them to stop and pause and think about their, how they're managing their accounts.
Yeah, I think if you could avoid doing that, it works better. But when we had Cloud Counting merge with Beanages, which was another Australian e-commerce firm about 2 or 3 years ago, even though we changed the brand, we didn't have to change the proposals because the billing was still going through the same entity. So the terms and conditions were the same. It was just the trading name that changed. And so that was very helpful with retention because it didn't really impact the clients. It was more just a name change. So before we move on to your next transition, were there any other lessons coming out of that Beanages transaction?
I think it went as smoothly as it could, really. No, I can't think of anything. I've got lots for the ones coming up, though.
All right, great. Let's dive into the next one. So, can you set the scene for the next one? How long after the Beanages transaction was it, and was there anything different this time around?
Yes. Okay. So I think because the Bean Ninjas transaction went so well, then I'm a bit buoyed and gung ho and ready to fire on all cylinders. So I had been keeping an eye on the market for practices that are becoming available. And so the second acquisition was through a business broker. So it was a genuine like business for sale listing, not just, not through a Facebook post or knowing someone.
Not just a Facebook post.
So, and it was a larger firm based in Sydney. So a lot, bookkeeping practices can be quite small, so that this is larger in turning over say $500,000 in fees, and a small team of like 4, I think, or something like that. So it was completely different because you liaising with a broker through the process, and I didn't know the business owner at all. So that's a totally different dynamic. And it was because I'd known watching the market for a long time that these practices of this size are not very frequently available. There's like, you can find, there's $100,000 fees, 200, like quite small ones that generally that's what has been listed that I have seen. So I was quite excited when this came up and started liaising with the broker. And it's just different because but I have come to decide this to be true, but they're really telling you that, they're overwhelmed with inquiry and they can't, get back to you. And there's, this is the most interest they've ever had in a business and all of this stuff, which I actually think at the time, perhaps like finance and these types of businesses are becoming increasingly popular to acquire. But you're kind of like half believing it, half not. Like, do I need to, put it? I haven't even spoken to the lady. Do I need to put in an offer like this minute? Do I offer the listed price? Like, is that foolish? You just have no idea. So you've just got to work through that whole process. And I insisted on or requested a meeting with the owner, which seems to be quite unusual, which I find unbelievable, particularly if you're buying a service-based business.
Yes.
But other brokers will tell you that no, they've got offers. And a lady that I ended up going into another negotiation with about another acquisition, which didn't come together, but she said to me that I was the only person that requested a Zoom meeting, which I find crazy.
I find that incredible. As the seller, I would want to meet everybody because that's going to impact the retention of you can assess pretty quickly in 10 minutes whether you think it's going to initially, whether it's going to be an absolute disaster or not.
I know. It was, it was a much longer process. So I think our opportunity would have been in mid 2021. So this would have been later that year, and then we settled in February 2022. So there's so much to say. It was like a much very complex deal, and also because I was dealing with somebody like the business owner, still we work together today, so she has stayed with Diverse and we have a fantastic working relationship, and that's been one of the best things to come out of the acquisition is meeting each other and working together, because she was getting selling her practice to get heading towards retiring, and we've stayed working together because she likes, she still wants to be doing something and utilising her skills, and so that's been fantastic. But I've been through several acquisitions, my business partner and what I'd done with Bean Ninjas, and I'd explored other opportunities that hadn't executed. So I was kind of, and also in my previous life, in my food business, I had done 2 business acquisitions with that, which I should mention. But so it was interesting going through the process with somebody who, like, they're fundamentally the owner of a small business and they've only, this is their first time. And I think there was a lot that went on between the lawyers, and it was a lot to negotiate the retention. It was just far more complex. And I think there have been a few key learnings, not to jump the gun, around So while fundamentally we are similar and have I'd say a similar approach to running a business and our services and how we interact with our staff and our clients, so we're quite aligned in that regard. But then I was really buying a traditional bookkeeping practice that had, while the majority of clients were on Xero, not all the clients were on Xero. It was going, completely different systems. So I had to migrate all of those clients onto XPM and the staff onto XPM. And, there was no fixed or like a few fixed fees. And if there were fixed fees and they'd charged like on some random day of the month, and no, they don't pay in advance, they pay in arrears, and no, this one does pay in advance. And it was like just very different. And I think that I underestimated how much work it takes, like those things that you think when you're in the negotiation phase, like, oh yeah, takes 5 minutes, we'll show the staff how to do this and we'll send the clients ignition proposals. Those things are quite momentous when you're so at the same time that this deal went through, Diverse itself just seemed to explode. So it was, that was really busy. Then you're aligning, bringing everything across, and you've got clients that have never done an e-signature. There was just a lot happening. And ultimately it's been successful and it's worked, but it was just a lot more complex than I anticipated. So I just want to make sure that it's not all like glory days, in that I can remember one day just sitting at my kitchen bench, like literally like shaking and crying, being like, oh, I've bitten off more than I can chew, like that I am literally there and you've got nothing. You just have to keep going. And in this case, like I had a loan to fund the deal because it was, significant. So you've got no option, like you have to keep going and make it work.
This podcast is brought to you by TeamUp, helping you to recruit rockstar Filipino accounting staff without the ongoing BPO fees. We've had Filipino accountants on the Bean Ninjas team for about 4 or 5 years, but my experience with BPOs has been average at best. When COVID hit and our BPO team moved to remote work, we started to question the value of paying an ongoing monthly fee for every team member, particularly as we had a couple of years of experience now working with an offshore team and no longer needed all of the support that a BPO can provide. TeamUp provides fixed price recruitment with no ongoing fees. It costs around $3,000 for them to run the end-to-end hiring process. That starts with creating an attractive job ad, promoting it on multiple platforms, attracting hundreds of candidates which they vet and interview and test, and ultimately they present the top 3 candidates for you to interview. We've just hired our first accountant in the Philippines with TeamUp. The process took about 5 weeks from beginning to end and saved our manager in the Philippines hours and hours of time. It's a busy time of year for us, and constantly hiring was taking her away from other valuable work like reviewing client files and also managing our team in the Philippines. TeamUp also offers an employer of record service through their partners, and that takes care of the compliance side of things. So next time you're looking to hire a rockstar accountant in the Philippines, check out hireteamup.com. That's HIRE, teamup, TEAMUP.com.
So many questions for you after hearing that. But let's start with the loan. So how did you go about getting the loan? And was that secured against anything? Because that would be interesting for other people, particularly who are interested on the acquisition side.
Well, I am very fortunate in that I loaned the funds through my husband's family's company. So it's like an internal loan that was through their business facility. So I repay the loan and I pay interest and all of those things, but I didn't literally have to go to the bank and do an application. So, because that would have been difficult. Yeah, so I was fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, that's helpful. And you mentioned that there was complexities in this transaction. And then a little earlier, you mentioned that you now have a checklist. So you've systemized the acquisition process. Are there a couple of specific things that particularly that you learned from this transaction that you now have added to that checklist?
Yes, well, not necessarily from this acquisition, but things I learned along the way, like make sure you triple check there's no personal relationships between the business owner and staff and the clients, because sometimes you'll go quite far down a deal and you'll find out that, oh no, it's the guy's brother who owns the group of, the largest clients. So I'd watch out for personal relationships. There's so many things, like I could talk all day, but you would make sure that, like, look at the length of time the clients have been with the company. So like if they've been there a few years, well, that's great. They're less likely to change. Whereas if they're new, then the relationship's still at risk in the earlier days. Looking at the stage that the businesses are at, like are they in growth phase? Are they in like sunset phase? If this is a company that, say, the practice is being sold because the business owner's retiring, like are the clients retiring? So there's lots of different things to ask and look at and make sure that you're buying something that you couldn't just grow yourself in the same.
Yeah. How did you think about that? Because I know your marketing works really well and Diverse is growing organically quickly too. So how were you thinking about those two different options?
I think, as I said earlier, I think I was just really looking at capitalizing on the structure that had been put in place. So I had some great staff that I still do. I have a fantastic team, but upskilled, trained, ready to go staff that it was like, okay, she's ready to elevate. Like if I can give her this opportunity or build this out, like move her up to run a team, they can look after this new client. So for me, it was just about capitalizing on what we'd already built, but then also considering like interest rates were low and also like you were paying for this key infrastructure. Like, the thing, going back to my friend, the financial planner, he was saying like, you increase your turnover, but those overheads won't increase at the same rate. So, that's where you build your bottom line. And that's what I was considering. So like running a budget, if I plug this in, like what does it look like? But like I'm still in that phase where I'm coming out of that because your costs do increase for a period of time, and then you only achieve the efficiencies after a while, because you kind of go through this time where if you're acquiring staff, or they become more inefficient as they adapt to new systems and it costs you money, etc.
I actually wanted to ask about that because in the the first acquisition was just clients only, no staff coming across, but the second one you've mentioned, the bigger one, I believe the business owner, the partner moved over and it sounds like some of the staff. So what was that like? I imagine there's more considerations when the team's coming over as well.
Yes. So
how did you find that?
It's been complex. That's my answer for everything, isn't it? So the business owner was contracted, like that was part of the deal that she had to stay on. I can't remember the technical term for that, but yeah, she had to stay on for a period of time. And that was all part of the agreement that she would work like this number of hours per week, and this was the agreement. So I mean, that's essential if you're acquiring the team. So the team all had to sign new employment agreements and come across, and I was softly introduced. So we did Zoom sessions to meet them and introduce myself, and the plan was that I would go to Sydney and meet everybody in person, but I think that was waylaid due to must have been COVID or something around the time. So it was actually a little while until I got to meet everybody. And like it's worked, like the team members, the key core team members are all still on board, and we have a great working relationship with them. And again, because the business owner and I are quite like aligned and similar in our approaches, I think that's worked well. But it's been difficult for some of the staff to adapt to the tech, because that's another thing. Like when you're going through that process, you've got to think about that the person selling the business, it's in their vested interest for you to believe that this is the most tech savvy, innovative, adoptive business going. And I think like when that's conveyed through a business broker too, it was like, it's only now that I've got further into it, and now I've been running it for over a year, that I think, it was a bit different, a bit behind where Diverse was at. And also they were going from the service difference, which was different from the deal with Bean Ninjas, was, these are going, the clients were going from a firm where, that small firm size where the business owner speaks to everyone and their dog and cat's name and what happened to their son, Bill, and all of like that mental service where the business owner has like worked 7 days a week and call me anytime and all of that. So that was like a massive adaptation for those clients to then go to Diverse, where we provide you with a rock solid service, but we're not on tap. Like you can contact us during business hours and that's that. And there's a few other like boundaries that we have in place that were a bit different. But overall, like again, same thing, you must have a retention clause, because there were clients lost in the process because we merged that company's branding straight into Diverse. So I wasn't interested in operating two different branding, two different companies. I just wanted to keep building the Diverse train.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to what you're talking about there. It was similar to when Cloud Cutting merged with us. So that was a firm that was smaller than us, and Tracy had a team, but the client relationships were still very oriented to her as the partner. And she's talked about this a little bit on her episode on this podcast. But it was very hard to untangle that, to change the service level from the Bean Ninjas service. Same kind of thing. We provide a good service, but there's a lot of boundaries around when the team's available. No, you can't have anyone's mobile phone number. You actually have to schedule calls through Calendly. You can't just pick up the phone. So it was quite hard to retrain. In fact, there was a lot of resistance to training the clients around having less Tracy time, which was one of my jobs, was to put in systems and processes and reset boundaries around that so we could scale beyond without needing her to work more hours. So that was definitely challenging as part of our transition to reset those expectations.
That's the biggest thing. But I think you've just got to stage it over time. Like people can't deal with too much change at once. So like first change is same people, same price, same expectations, but now you're seeing a Diverse logo on your billing. So we go through that for a couple of months, and then we'll make another change. And it's just been over time that you've built that alignment.
Yeah, great point about just staggering it. So you get used to this, and then it'll be gradually something different.
I just think I've made that mistake before when I was younger in different industries, but with food, I bought a business and then I thought, right, let's change this, let's change that, and you've overhauled the whole business and you think it's all for the better, but I think it just puts at risk those fundamental relationships. So, and what was core to that business that you didn't even realize. So it's always like slowly, like you'll get there in the end.
Got more patient as we've got older. All right, well, let's hear about the third transaction.
Okay, so now I've got so much business that I need more stuff. So I ended up, this one was interesting and went really well. So I must have done a Facebook post looking for a team leader for somebody. So at Diverse, the whole business is broken into these teams or pods. And so we needed a fourth pod and I needed an experienced person to come on board to run that. And it can be quite challenging to find people with the right experience level to take that on. And then, you're going out to quite an introverted industry and say, okay, I need a people manager as well, someone that can do client relationships and manage the work. So I was on the hunt for someone in that regard. And then I became connected with a lady who had been running her own practice, a solo practice, and she, was looking for a change from what she'd been doing. So she took on the team leader role at Diverse. And then when we were negotiating around that role, she did ask, would I be interested in acquiring her client base if everything went well? So we commenced working together, and after a few months, it was going well. So then we commenced negotiations around the acquisition or merging her clients into Diverse.
Interesting. So that one was less about acquiring more fees, but almost like an acqui-hire of how do you get a great talented person? Oh, well, she happens to own a business. And so that's a way to secure her long-term role with Diverse. Interesting. And so were there any lessons or challenges coming out of that one?
Well, she was contracted. So after the acquisition and then the retention period, she was contracted that she had to stay in that role for a certain period of time, which I think may have been 6 months. And so she did resign from the role after.
Ooh, ouch.
She still works here. So we have maintained a great working relationship and she's still part of the Diverse team. But I think what I understand is that so she was moving away from being a solo practitioner to get better work-life boundaries and to be able to take holidays and to, have space. And then I think coming into Diverse, into the team leader role, which was high growth, pretty hectic, a lot of change going on with, merging these other clients in. And so she has changed to a bookkeeping role at Diverse now, in that she, just wants a lower stress position. So I think that was okay because yes, ouch, but also you've got to be ready for these things and you've got to have pre-planned it. And when a size practice that we have now with, I think there's 25 staff and 300 and something clients, it cannot be dependent on one person. So because people, even though I want, and I have a great team that have stayed with me for a long time, nobody's going to stay forever. Things happen, things change. So, and this is why Diverse is built the way it is, so that even though she can step out of that role, they're still emailing the same email address, they still phone the same phone number. From their perspective, as long as they're receiving the same service, it shouldn't change. And we haven't lost any. 100% of the clients in that deal were retained. But it was, again, better aligned in that it was 100% zero, all fixed fees. They were already on XPM, already charged on the first of the month in advance. So there was a lot of alignment there, which made it easier.
I thought you meant she left the business entirely after the 6 months, but that makes more sense, that she still stayed but just wanted to change role and not be in that leadership role. I actually noticed, so a lot of our team is in the Philippines, but we find that team leader role much harder to fill than our senior or junior and senior accounting and bookkeeping roles. That we've got a few people that are ambitious and want to grow into people management, and so then we train them up. But we've definitely picked some people where they're great technically, some of our strongest technical staff, and then they think they want to do leadership, and then they try it and very quickly decide that that's not for them. I mean, have you got any tips about how you find the people leaders or the team leaders in a bookkeeping firm?
It is really challenging. So two of my team leaders are, there's 4. One was an external recruit through a recruitment agent, and that took a long time to find her. And then 2 are internal promotions, and the other was another external recruit. I think you do not hire just on technical skills. You cannot. So it's got to be in the soft people skills, how they're going to. So each of mine manage, say, a team of 5 or so, and they've got to have those soft skills to be a safe space that the bookkeepers can come and ask their questions, that they can, because, that's how you know what's going wrong, if people feel comfortable enough to ask questions. They've got to have those people skills. It is difficult. I would skill test, and then we personality test, and I still, even though we have a HR lady as part of our team, I still personally interview, because just after so much, you start to pick up on what is going to make a great team leader. And for us, that's the most critical thing, because they have to ensure that team is hitting the KPIs and that work isn't getting, because we don't micromanage the work, and I don't have we're running everything off XPM. So I can't see that you process that payroll at that time, or, there's no tick box. So you're really relying on the team leader to have that oversight over what's going on, and very important.
Well, we're coming up to the end of the conversation. Do you have any final thoughts around acquisitions and your experience now that you've done a few? I mean, the next question for me is probably, when's the next one?
I'm having a breather at the moment. No, I feel like we've built a company that I love the size of it, and my aspiration's probably not to get any bigger. It's just to get better at what we do, and it's a great size. And you would appreciate this. I went from, and when I knew that I had reached the space that I wanted to be in, I went from because our team went from 8 to 25 in 7 months or something crazy. And then I went down to our team retreat, and I had to stand up and speak. And you don't think 25 people is that many people, but everybody looking at me, their life depending on me, I was like, okay, that's enough people. So just going from, I'm normally, working from Dalaka, talking to my computer, and then to suddenly see everybody in real life was a lot. So we're in a great sweet spot now, and I love small business. So I love knowing my team and being as involved as I am. So I'm probably not one to aspire to franchise into every state, or I don't know, do all those kinds of things. And so I'd never say never about another acquisition, because if the right opportunity came up, I would explore it. I mean, I'm all about exploring every opportunity pretty much. And then, if as the red flags come up, knocking it out once, and if I was doing it again, I would be really looking for complete alignment. So when you meet the business owner, do you connect? Are you aligned in your approaches to business? Because it's not just a deal said and done and you never see them again. It's quite a prolonged process, and you've got to work together. So if they're difficult in the negotiation or signing the contract, you're signing up for a world of pain afterwards. So abort. I just think, look, and don't get so enthusiastic about the opportunity that you can't see the signs. Don't overlook the red flags as they come up, And I would be thinking about like, what's my business look like now? Where am I going? What do I want to achieve? Is this going to be easy to merge? Well, it depends whether you're taking their branding or merging or acquiring or whatever it might be, but just stay on that path and ensure that you're making the right decision for your life overall.
Amazing. Well, if anyone is interested or has maybe they've got an acquisition offer for you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Probably via our website, which is diverse, diverse, bc.com.au, and you can reach out through the contact page.
Amazing. Such a fun chat, Sarah. Thanks so much for dropping by the podcast.
Thank you.
I enjoyed my conversation with Sarah today, and it was fun to reflect on the transaction that we did together with Diverse acquiring a client portfolio from Bean Ninjas. It was also interesting to hear about Sarah's entrepreneurial journey, and I liked that not being an accountant or bookkeeper didn't stop her from buying into a bookkeeping business, and maybe it was even an advantage. She did go on and get her bookkeeping qualification, but it sounds like it may have helped her to hire other bookkeepers and focus on the running of the business and things like marketing, processes, and people, the fact that she didn't originally come from that background. Sarah shared some tips about acquisitions, and these are the ones that stood out to me. Take the time to understand the incentives and the motivations of the seller. That can be important both in terms of what to focus on in the contract negotiation and also how to make sure the transition runs smoothly. Think about what era the firm that you're looking to acquire is in. Is the owner retiring, and do they have lots of clients who are also retiring from their business? That might impact how long these clients may stick around with you if you acquire them. Watch out for personal relationships in the fee base. Is the largest client actually the firm owner's brother? Again, that can change how long you're going to retain these clients. And another question to ask is the length of time that the clients have been around at the firm, because if they're newer clients, then it's more likely that they may not stick around during the transition. So some really great tips from Sarah there, and 3 different acquisitions with different outcomes and different challenges. If you've been enjoying the podcast, then it would be amazing if you could take the time to leave a 5-star review with a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts. That's greatly appreciated.